The Power Talk Afternoon Show. Here again is Kevin Fox on Power Talk 1360 and 1280.
It is the Power Talk Afternoon Show, Power Talk 1360 and 1280. I am Kevin Fox. My guests, plural, more than one. Tyler Thalman, California Shooting Sports. We are talking Second Amendment and the overwhelming number of laws that are coming into effect. Once again, Tyler and I were sitting here talking about what's what and which bills are what, trying to sort through all of this. And there's so much redundancy here. There's so much stuff is already on the books. And it just seems like this whole thing is the intent to create more bureaucracy, drain you of more money through taxation, because they can't come and knock on your door and take your guns from you. They intend to tax you out of your Second Amendment rights. Because if they came to your door, we're here to collect your guns. That is a PR nightmare for them. And they've decided that, that maybe that's not the right approach. So tax. They're going to do that. And believe me, they have a place for your money. It's in the pockets of our politicians in Sacramento. So also joining me is Craig DeLuz from the Firearms Policy. Here it is, a Firearms Policy Coalition. He is on the phone with us. Craig, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Hey, so I want to start with you, and because you had this really interesting article about the UC Davis first Gun Violence Research Center. You are quoted in this article. Give us the gist of this, man.
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that it's not the first gun violence research center. It's actually been in existence for over 20 years. So, the real issue here is that this is an idea that's come out that's completely and utterly based on lies. First and foremost, the authors said, well, we need, these are all anti-gun legislators who support this, and they're like, we need some data that says what we, meaning they, know to be true, which are guns are bad and need to be banned. So then they looked at, where can we get that data? So let's look at CDC. CDC has some data, but CDC really doesn't do a lot of research. Well, why not? Well, CDC says it's because of this evil, nasty thing called the Dickey Amendment, which they say completely prohibits them from being able to do firearms research. Well, if one then goes and reads the Dickey Amendment, all the Dickey Amendment says is that none of this money shall be used to advocate for gun control. So all the Dickey Amendment says is you can't advocate. It does not say that you cannot research. Having said that, they've decided, since they cannot advocate at the CDC, they will not do the research. So, fast forward to California. Well, they're saying we still need this data that will tell us exactly what we believe to be true, even though the facts don't support it. So we need data. So we're going to create this entity. We're going to put some money aside, about $5 million, in order to do research here in California about gun violence. And so they said, what we're going to do is we're going to create this thing at the UC, this research center. And this research center, it's going to be unbiased and all of that. And then they're going to do research, and that research is going to then give us objective data that tells us that it's okay for us to then ban guns. So then we look at, Lois Wolk is the state senator who's putting this forward. She represents the city of Davis, which at UC Davis, there's this researcher named Garen Wintemute, who has about 20 years history of doing anti-gun research and advocacy. And we all know, and we're all saying, look, this is a sole source contract written specifically to target and do research on how to best decide how to ban guns, or that we should ban guns.
Yeah,
then it's going to be a sole source contract to go to this guy, Garen Wintemute. They swore up and down there's going to be an RFP, a request for proposal. We're going to look at all of the different UCs, and we're going to give everybody an opportunity to be a part of this. And lo and behold, after they get it passed, literally within a couple of weeks, the UC chancellor announces, oh, we're going to be putting this gun research center at UC Davis and putting over it Garen Wintemute. But everything was completely done on the up and up, and it's completely objective. And that is the fairy tale of the UC Gun Violence Research Center.
Craig DeLuz, Director of Legislative and Public Affairs from the Firearms Policy Coalition, on the phone with me. I've got a great quote here in this article from this Wintemute character, who I don't think you mentioned has been the Violence Prevention Research Program Director of the UC Davis Medical Center for over 25 years. His quote here is, "We don't know how common is firearms ownership in California. What are the benefits? Lots of people own guns. They don't do it for nothing. There is an individual right to keep and bear arms for specific purposes." In that, I would disagree. I would argue that there is also an individual and collective civil right to live in a free and safe society. We need to balance those out. So in that quote in itself from Wintemute, I deduce that this is already predetermined, this outcome of any research he does.
Right. Oh, most definitely. And in fact, I made it a point when they tried to say that he was objective. My point was, I've never seen Garen Wintemute testify in a legislative hearing against any restriction to the Second Amendment rights of citizens. Never, ever. And that's, as now as they're saying, well, but it's objective. How can it be objective when the entire creation of this research center is based on lies?
Yeah, well, it seems like they sure have picked the right guy here. Another quote here is, he says, "One of the key missing elements is just the basic information on firearms violence in California that people need in order to understand the problem." So he's already identified it as a problem, and to do things to prevent it. The who, what, when, and where of firearms violence. The last time anybody did that in California was 1987. It's been apparently that long. It's been 29 years, and I know because I'm the person that did it. So it sounds to me like, and incidentally, they're getting $1 million to set this whole brand new violence research center up. So it sounds to me like this guy's going to be sitting pretty in a nice new office at UC Davis, and he's already determined what the outcome of his report is because he's been collecting the data for 29 years.
And as we then go and we decide, we say, okay, well, we need to make sure that the taxpayer dollars are being used for valid purposes, and that it is objective. There's no guarantee that the raw data that he utilizes or his research methods have to be made open and available. And we're going to have to anyone who's interested in making sure that it's objective is going to have to spend their own money. They're not going to get taxpayer dollars in order to check the validity of his work. And the other issue that we've brought up is this: is if you want to talk about something like, for example, firearms violence, in this particular case, what they're doing is you've got medical professionals who are looking at it and look at gun violence like a disease. And the thing that they are completely and utterly excluding is the human factor. And in a case like that, most of the times when you're looking at human behavior, social scientists are preferable in terms of understanding and being able to conduct this sort of research. So why we are not looking at social scientists or economists in order to do these sorts of studies, these sorts of objective studies, I do not know, except to say that most medical doctors, with the exceptions of, for example, Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, most medical organizations are opposed to firearms and support restrictions on firearms everywhere they go.
Yeah, that's the question you get asked when you take your kid to the emergency room and they've got a cold and they say, "Do you have guns in the house?" And yet you don't. What difference does that make?
Hey, Craig, no, mine is on me. Thank you very much.
Hey, can you stick around? I need to take a break here. I'd like to get back and maybe run through some of this legislation, and maybe we can get a little dialogue going between you and Tyler here from your expertise on the legislative side and his expertise here as the small business owner, i.e. the gun shop. Can you stick around?
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome, man. Just stay on the line. Yeah. It is the Power Talk Afternoon Show, Power Talk 1360 and 1280. I'm going to bring Craig back into the fold here. Welcome back to the show, sir. Tyler is here as well from California Shooting Sports. Craig DeLuz, Director of Legislative and Public Affairs from the Firearms Policy Coalition. I just want to, we don't have a lot of time left today. As Tyler and I were talking, the Panthers and the Broncos are going to get it on right here on Power Talk 1360 and 1280 right after this segment. But we kind of want to go through some of this stuff, and I think maybe between the two of you, you can help clarify some of this. Assembly Bill 1511 requires that frequent loans of firearms, basically the law that's prohibiting loaning out guns and restrictions on that. Help me out, guys. Where are we out on this? I know we're not going to get through all of this.
To make a long story short, unless you go through a background check, you can only loan your firearm to your spouse. And, oh, by the way, it has to be registered if you want to loan it to your spouse.
So here's my hang up on it. And again, I was telling Tyler, the libertarian in me wants the government out of my life. And what difference does it make? If I know I'm loaning a gun, it's going to be used in a crime. That's bad, and I don't want that to happen. But the government doesn't need to know if I loan my neighbor my lawnmower. So what difference is that? That gun's my personal property. Anyone?
Yeah. No, you hit the nail right on the head.
Huh. All right. Go down my list here so we can get as many of these possible. SB 880. This is definition of assault weapon and semi-automatic rifles with magazines that can detach. It's the bullet button bill. Help me out, guys.
Go ahead, Chris. You're probably better at answering things than me. I mean, I can see what the gun shop side of this is, and the fact of the matter is we're the ARs, if you will, are kind of operating on a loophole right now, and this is the goal to close that loophole, and redefine what an assault weapon is and take away more of what we've already got.
The one area where I will correct you is that it's actually not a loophole. It was actually specifically written into the regulations that a bullet could be used as a tool. The problem is, and this is unfortunately the way they work in the California legislature, any law they don't like, they consider a loophole. These laws, and this one in particular, passed by folks who don't understand firearms, don't understand the technology. They don't really understand, what an AR is or how it works or how some of these semi-automatic rifles work. So, in the end, we don't know exactly what this is going to look like until the regulations are written. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we know that some folks have already created some workarounds, but we don't know exactly whether or not which of those are going to be good under the law until the actual regulations come out.
So ultimately, this is for instance here is DeLeon calling it a ghost gun. And not under
30 magazine clip.
Yeah, with a 30 magazine clip. Yeah, exactly. Other legislation here is now these are the ones that get me. Making it a misdemeanor, filing a false police report. This is 1695. Filing a false police report for a lost or stolen gun. I mean, ultimately, isn't it already against the law to file a false police report?
Yes, it is, but here's the thing. The thing about you want to be concerned about is that it also now makes it a prohibiting offense, meaning you lose your gun rights for 10 years.
Wow. Mm-hmm. All right. So ultimately, they're applying drunk driving laws to gun ownership, irresponsible gun ownership. That's what that comes down to.
They can't ban guns, but they can ban gun owners.
SB 1235, this is Kevin DeLeon, new regulatory framework for purchasing and selling ammunition. This one gets me because, going to this CCW price hike, ultimately this new tax on CCWs, and now this ultimately comes down to they're going to price you out of, with Proposition 63, they're going to price you out of ammunition as well.
Well, the interesting thing about this, and this is why we also need to be careful about and stop Proposition 63, is now if we're going to have an ammunition registration scheme, 1235 is actually better than Prop 63. Now, having said that, both of them are bad. The only thing that's going to be really interesting about 1235 is I'm real curious to see if they can't do an instant background check for a firearm, how are they going to do instant background checks for ammunition?
That's a very good point, Tyler. We talked about that a little bit. Doesn't this, for you, it creates headaches as the shop owner, and it ultimately creates a whole new bureaucracy. Didn't you say 75 cents per purchase is coming? So ultimately, it does come down to a tax, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's fees associated to the state, and then there's going to be fees associated in the shops that have to do with, basically just manpower. It's going to cost us a whole bunch of money to have to do this stuff.
Exactly, and this is going to wind up putting a lot of work, and one on the Department of Justice, who the California Department of Justice can do absolutely nothing effectively or efficiently. They prove that with every law that's passed, but also it's going to put a lot of additional requirements and make it exceptionally onerous for FFLs, for gun store owners, and that's also all part of the plan as well. They want to put gun shop owners out of business because they figure if they can put them out of business, well, then, you have a right to own guns, but you don't necessarily have a right to buy them.
All right, just a couple more here. 1176, this is an initiative to put on the ballot to clarify that stealing a firearm is a felony. Isn't theft already a felony? I think that's pretty simplistic. And here's one that has a lot of confusion. 1446, the banning possession of high-capacity magazines holding more than 10 rounds. If you own one of these already, does that already criminalize you? Or is there going to be some kind of registration? Or Tyler's got a big grin on his face. Does this ultimately create a whole new bureaucracy? Is there going to be the office of registering your firearms magazine now?
If you own one, you will be required to get rid of it. Meaning, you can either sell it to a dealer who is able to purchase it, or you must sell it out of state, or you must destroy it, or you must turn it in.
Is that feasible? Are people going to do that?
Well, let's put it this way: in the city of Los Angeles and in the city of San Francisco, they have these magazine bans, and no one has turned one in.
I see an awful lot of.
You take it from there.
But that's because they're law-abiding citizens, and they wouldn't have them in the first place, right?
Well, one of the things that we're going to have to just we'll keep first of all keep in mind, if you own one right now, you are not breaking the law.
Right.
If you as long as you didn't purchase it after they were made, after the purchase of them was made illegal. But otherwise, we need to stop. We're going to have to, unfortunately, we're going to have to get to a point where we're going to have to stop talking about quote-unquote law-abiding gun owners, because they are passing so many laws and so many onerous laws and so many ridiculous laws that eventually people are just, people who I talk to who are law-abiding citizens are just saying, you know what, I'm just going to ignore it. Think about it. At a certain point, you pass so many laws and so many stupid laws that people just start to ignore them. Kind of like, remember when the speed limit was 55 miles an hour? How many people do you know drove 55 miles an hour on the freeway back then?
Very, very good point. 2607, this expands the list of people who are able to petition for gun violent restraining orders, including employers, co-workers, mental health, and social and school workers. So ultimately, if you're threatening somebody with a gun, don't you already have the right to go and petition for a restraining order? Why is that list so restrictive?
That one actually got vetoed by the governor. We were able to put together a coalition that included the ACLU, that included mental health professionals, that included. It included a broad span of people on the right, left, center, who just said that this was just too much.
Perfect. One more here, 1674, limit on handguns of one purchase per month to long guns. I'm reading that incorrectly.
It applies it also to long guns.
I see. So you can only buy. So this is like if you buy a car, you buy one a month, right? So because if you buy or sell more than 12 cars a year, that makes you a dealer.
Yeah, something like. Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
Just to note, the restriction on handguns was already in place. This would have expanded it to long guns, and it was also vetoed by the governor.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. Craig, stay on the line. I want to talk to you right after the show. I got football coming up.
If you like these updates, please share them with your friends and subscribe to our YouTube channel.